faithfully convey value and interpret great books from around the world. Hello, this is Sally's Book Club. Today I'll introduce you to the book called The Nuer, a classic anthropological work from the 20th century. When it comes to anthropology, you might find it a bit unfamiliar, but this discipline isn't far from any of us. For example, the BBC has mini documentaries like Visiting an African Tribe or showcasing the lives of locals in the South Pacific. The knowledge in these films comes from anthropological observations. Moreover, anthropologists have labeled these tribes' ways of survival as historical markers, viewing their customs as fossil specimens on the path of human evolution. Today, we can vividly describe the lives of prehistoric humans, largely thanks to the existence of anthropology. Simply put, anthropology is responsible for documenting the diverse ways of life in this world. It tells us that the social institutions, organizational methods, and value norms we take for granted are not a given. Anthropology is a starting point that helps us understand the vast differences between cultures and groups of people. The book, The Newer, is an academic record by British anthropologist Evans-Pritchard about a specific group of people in Africa. The Nuer are a tribal people living in the Nile River basin of South Sudan. In the 1930s, this region had no state, no central government, and not even laws for arbitration. This sparked people's curiosity. The Nuer lacked the various administrative institutions familiar to other complex civilizations. So, could there be any order in such a stateless society? To find the answer, Evans-Pritchard lived among the Nuer, learned their language, and endured tropical mosquito bites and diseases like malaria. After some time, Evans-Pritchard became the most popular person in the Nuer camp, with men, women, and children all visiting his tent to chat. These indigenous people were overjoyed. They came in an endless stream from dawn till dusk, allowing Evans-Pritchard to gather a wealth of in-depth information. Using this material, he eventually completed The Nuer. This book opens up a world of life beyond our imagination. The main content of this book revolves around three major themes. First, what kind of ecological environment did the Nuer live in? Second, what kind of temporal and spatial order did this ecological environment shape? Third, what institutions did the Nuer develop to maintain social operation in a state without a country or government? First, let's talk about the ecological environment where the Nuer live. For humans to survive, they must obtain resources from the environment. This is the foundation of social development. This is no exception for the Nuer. The area where the Nuer live covers approximately 30,000 square miles, with a population of about 200,000. This region is where the Nile River and two other tributaries converge, with an exceptionally harsh environment. Every year when the rainy season comes, the three rivers flood, turning the Nuer region into a vast marshland covered with dense grass, with weeds growing as tall as a person. In the dry season, the sun scorches all day. Surface water evaporates quickly, weeds dry up, and the land cracks. The floods of the rainy season and the intense sun of the dry season force the Nuer to frequently migrate between highland camps and grassland villages. Besides the harsh climate, resources in the Nuer region are very scarce. There is neither iron nor stone here, so iron tools cannot be sourced locally. As you can imagine, the Nuer's production technology couldn't develop complex techniques, so local output was pitifully low. The entire Nuer society has only simple mixed agriculture. Besides herding cattle and growing sorghum, they also fish and hunt, especially cattle, which is the core of the Nuer community. Indeed, cattle are central. First, because in this harsh living environment, it is the main resource for the Nuer's material life. Cattle produce milk. The sorghum grown by the Nuer, if eaten without milk, is not only coarse and hard to swallow, but also difficult to digest. Additionally, fresh milk can be made into cheese, and applied to the body to reduce water evaporation. Of course, the Nuer also very much enjoy eating beef, although they raise cattle not usually for slaughter but for sacrificial rituals. So, whenever the Nuer want to feast, they find a good reason to hold a sacrificial ritual. Besides milk and meat, cowhide can be made into beds, blankets, and trays. Cow bones can be made into armbands and other labor tools. Cow dung is the main fuel for the Nuer, as well as material for walls and floors. The remaining ash after burning is used to scrub the body, similar to the body scrub we use today, and can even be used as tooth powder for brushing teeth. Cattle provide various resources for people's lives. So, Pritchard said the Nuer are veritable parasites on the backs of cattle. Moreover, cattle are central to the Nuer community because the Nuer people's entire lives revolve around caring for the herds, creating a symbiotic intimacy between humans and cattle. It's hard for us modern folks to imagine that Nuer children play in cattle pens from a young age, treating calves as playmates and even rolling around in cow dung. As they grow older, they help clean barns and pens, assist with milking, and herd cattle on the grasslands. Calves, young boys get all excited talking about their bulls. They hang long tassels on the horns, sing songs praising their favorite women and bulls. The Nuer and cattle form a tight-knit community. At night, they sleep among the cattle, and in the morning, they watch them wake up contentedly. Then they herd the cattle to pasture, spend the day watching them graze and drink. The Nuer create poems for them and make beautiful sacrificial ropes and decorations. They know every cow of their own and their neighbors, can tell each one's color, horn shape, even how many teats it has and what quirks it's got. Who is this cow's mother? And who are its ancestors? The Nuer know everything. In this symbiotic relationship, we can even say cattle are people and people are cattle. A sense of identity, consistency arises between the Nuer and cattle. Most of the Nuer's social activities and relationships are defined by cattle. On one hand, the unity of the Nuer community is maintained through cattle. Everyone herds them collectively, and milk from any cow is shared by all. On the other hand, cattle are the primary wealth in the Nuer world. Once, a Nuer man told Pritchard that with money, you can trust the Nuer. You could leave hundreds of pounds here for years and no one would take it. But if it's a cow, that's a whole different matter. All right, we've covered the Nuer's ecological environment. It's a harsh, resource-scarce place where cattle are the baton of social life. From anthropology's view, the ecological environment shapes social life, and from that, the matching concept of order emerges. Among these orders, the primary one is the sense of time and space. All social life is fundamentally organized around time and space. So, how does Pritchard describe the temporal and spatial order of the Nuer in this book? First, let's look at the Nuer's concept of time. The Nuer's time is divided into two types. One is called ecological time, and the other is structural time. Ecological time is derived from changes in the natural environment, while structural time comes from non-natural social activities. First, let's look at ecological time. The Nuer region has distinct rainy and dry seasons, so they divide the year into two seasons, Tot and Meto. Tot refers to mid-March to mid-September in the Gregorian calendar, when rainfall increases. Meto refers to mid-September to late March, when rainfall decreases. So, during the transition periods in March and September, the Nuer prepare to move. As the rainy season nears its end, they start preparing to leave the lush villages for highland camps to herd cattle. At the end of the dry season, when they see clouds thickening, they prepare to dismantle the camp. Returning to the village, the alternation of rainy and dry seasons corresponds to moving between villages and camps, two different concepts of time in their lives. Besides Tot and Meadow, the Nuer have two transitional seasons, Ri and Guillaume. Re is when the rainy season peaks. During the period before that, people move from camps to villages, clear fields, plant sorghum. Diem means wind. During this time, the north wind starts blowing, and people set up camps. These time divisions differ from modern calendars. They're vague and ecology based. So, how is each day divided? The Newer's watch isn't like ancient Chinese hours, Z, Cho, etc., or the 24-hour clock. It's a cattle clock. Time is divided based on herding activities. The Newer might say, I'll be back at milking time, or I'll leave when the calves return home. As mentioned, ecological time is the order imposed by nature on the Newer. This order is about years, months, days. So, how do the Newer record years? How do they know how long ago something happened? Was it 10 years ago or decades ago? This brings us to the Newer's structural time. In the Newer world, there are no numbers like 1985 or 1990 to record years. Chronology is organized around events. For example, the Newer use important ceremonies to mark a year, or the birth of a calf in a family, or times of tribal conflicts. This method of time estimation relies heavily on living people's memories, so its practical limit is about 50 years. Further back, reference points become scarce and very vague. Having discussed the Newer's concept of time, next, we'll explore the Newer spatial concepts, which also include two types: ecological distance and structural distance. Here, ecology and structure derive from the natural environment and human society, respectively. Well, viewed from above, the Newer region is divided by rivers into tribes, with grasslands and marshes interwoven, dotted with villages, huts, and cattle pens. The Newer's ecological distance is determined by water sources and vegetation. It's visible spatial distribution, but structural distance isn't immediately apparent. It refers to distance between groups in a social system, focusing on relational closeness and social ties and values. Consider this: distance from village A to B equals that to C, but A and B share a tribe, while C belongs to another. Structurally, A and B are closer than A and C. This spatial concept, like time, forms a basic rule of Newer social order. Of course, these aren't the entirety of Newer social order. Next, Pritchard addresses the crucial question: without state or government, what institutions did the Newer develop to maintain social functioning? No state or government doesn't mean absence of conflict, nor that they lacked solutions for stable social operation. Pritchard found Newer social order stems from three institutions: political, kinship, and age-set systems. First, the political system. The tribe is their largest political unit, each with a specific name, and people within the tribe share common camps, pastures, water sources, and fish ponds, with an obligation to defend these resources. Tribal members have deep collective affection for this community and the land they occupy. This resembles modern nations, and tribes often belittle others to gain pride. The tribe is the largest unit, branching down hierarchically to villages as the smallest division. Villages consist of individual families with cottages, homes, huts, and pens, separated by farmland and grazing areas. A village population ranges from 50 to 100 people, typically close patrilineal relatives. The Newer political system has key features. First, smaller groups foster stronger bonds. For example, emotional connections in villages are stronger than in tribes, with greater intimacy. Smaller groups mean more interaction and cooperation among members. In villages, kinship ties exist, while large tribes interact minimally, uniting mainly for military campaigns. But if it's a cow, that's a whole different matter. All right, we've covered the Newer's harsh, resource-scarce environment where cattle guide social life. Anthropologically, the environment shapes social life, from which matching concepts of order emerge. Foremost among these orders is the sense of time and space, fundamental organizers of all social life. So, how does Pritchard describe the Newer's spatiotemporal order? First, let's examine the Newer concept of time. concept. Newer time divides into ecological and structural time. Ecological time stems from natural environmental changes, while structural time derives from social activities. First, ecological time. With distinct rainy or dry seasons, the Nuer divide the year into Tot and Meto. Tot refers to mid-March to mid-September, when rainfall increases. Meadow refers to mid-September to late March, when rainfall decreases. So during the seasonal transitions in March and September, the Nuer prepare to move. As the rainy season nears its end, they prepare to leave lush villages for highland camps to herd cattle. At the dry season's end, seeing thickening clouds, they prepare to dismantle camp. Returning to villages, the rainy-dry alternation corresponds to shifting between villages and camps. Two distinct concepts of time in their lives. Beyond Tot and Meadow, the Nuer have transitional seasons, Ri and Giyam. Ri is when the rainy season peaks. Before that period, people move from camps to villages, clear fields, plant sorghum. Giyam means wind. During this time, north winds blow and people construct camps. These time divisions differ from modern calendars. They're ecology-based and approximate. So how is each day divided? A Nuer's clock isn't ancient Chinese hours, Zi, Chow, or 24-hour time. It's a cattle clock. Time is segmented by herding activities. A Nuer might say, I'll return at milking time, or I'll depart when calves come home. As mentioned, ecological time is nature-imposed order on the Nuer. Disorder governs years, months, days. But how do the Nuer track years? How do they gauge how long ago something occurred? Was it decades ago or merely years? This leads to the Nuer structural time. In the Nuer world, years aren't recorded as 1985 or 1990. Chronology is event-based. For instance, they use major ceremonies, calf births, or tribal conflicts to mark years. This time estimation relies heavily on living memory. Thus, its practical limit is about 50 years. Beyond that, temporal reference points become scarce and vague. Having discussed the Nuer's concept of time, next we'll talk about the Nuer's spatial concept, which also includes two types: ecological distance and structural distance. Here, ecology and structure derive from the natural environment and human society, respectively. If viewed from above, the Nuer region is divided by rivers into tribes, with grasslands and marshes interwoven, dotted with villages, huts, and cattle pens. The Nuer's ecological distance is determined by water sources and vegetation here. Its visible spatial distribution you can see with your eyes, but structural distance isn't so obvious and can't be spotted at a glance. It refers to the distance between groups in a social system, focusing on closeness and social ties and values. We can draw an analogy. The distance from village A to B is the same as to C, but A and B belong to the same tribe, while C belongs to another. So, structurally, A and B are closer than A and C. This spatial concept, like time, is a basic rule of Nuer social life order. Of course, these aren't the entirety of Nuer social order. Next, Pritchard delves into the most crucial question. Without state or government, what institutions did the Nuer develop to maintain social functioning? No state or government doesn't mean absence of conflict among the Nuer, nor that they lacked other ways to achieve stable social operation. Pritchard found Nuer social order stems mainly from three institutions: political, kinship, and age-set systems. First, let's discuss the political system. The tribe is the largest political unit, a political group with a specific name. People within the tribe share common camps, pastures, water sources, and fish ponds, with an obligation to defend these resources. Tribal members have deep collective affection for this community and the land they occupy. This resembles modern nations, and tribes often belittle others to gain pride. The tribe is the largest unit, branching down hierarchically to villages as the smallest division. Villages are composed of individual families, with cottages, homes, huts, and pens. They're separated by farmland and open spaces for grazing livestock. A village population ranges from 50 to 100 people, typically close patrilineal relatives. The newer political system has several key features. First, the smaller the group, the stronger the emotional bonds among members. And, for example, in village communities, people's emotional ties are stronger and more intimate than in tribes. The smaller the group, the more contact and cooperation among members. Plus, in a village, everyone has some kinship ties, whereas in large groups like tribes, contact is rare and only happens during military campaigns. Mm. Boys who undergo initiation rituals together are said to belong to the same age set, similar to tribal rites. In the film Warriors of the Rainbow, Dick Bale about Indigenous history, it also depicts newer social norms involving age sets, like members being equal and always together in work or leisure, but a man can't marry her, a fellow clan member's daughter, as a wife, because in age sets, she's in the father group and the woman is in the daughter group, so they're broadly seen as father and daughter. Additionally, younger age set members must show respect to older ones. For instance, members of a person's father's age set, like uncles, are broadly considered fathers, and their wives are seen as mothers. And then, from this angle, the age set system resembles an expanded kinship system. All right, we've covered the three main sources of Nuer social order. This highly investigative anthropological report on the Nuer is now complete. Finally, I'll add some external context on the book's significance and the current fate of the Nuer people. In 1899, the Sudan region where the Nuer live was jointly administered by Britain and Egypt. The British moved up the Nile River, exploiting local tribal conflicts to control the area. During this period, the British allied closely with the Dinka people, and since the Nuer often raided Dinka livestock, relations with the British were strained. The British repeatedly sent investigators to study the Nuer's customs, but all efforts were fruitless. It wasn't until the 1930s when the British government commissioned Evans-Pritchard to re-enter the region that valuable information was finally obtained. Using data from this survey, Pritchard wrote 3 books on the Nuer, Kinship and Marriage Among the Nuer, and Nuer Religion, filling a gap in humanity's civilizational map. Moreover, this stateless, governmentless social organization represents a significant pattern in Africa. The Nuer political system became an archetype for understanding African civilizations. That's this book's vital contribution. Hearing this, some might wonder, what changes have the Nuer undergone today? In 1956, Sudan's independence introduced state governance that deeply impacted Nuer existence. Over 50-plus years of Sudanese civil wars, the Nuer were tragically swept into conflict. Many became refugees forced to flee to Kenya and Ethiopia. In 2011, South Sudan's independence made the Nuer its second largest ethnic group. Yet in South Sudan's subsequent civil war, they still couldn't escape war's curse. But one constant remains. During wars, governments sanction Nuer militias by confiscating cattle, and the Nuer still take arms to defend their crucial survival partners. All right, that concludes our exploration of the Nuer. Find reading notes below the audio. See you tomorrow.